Welcome to another episode of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, and I'm here to break some breaking news, which, if you ever watch this network, every beginning of every show is breaking news. So I'm going to break some breaking news, which is if you ever need a tip because you're involved in some illegal activity, don't you worry. You can find yourself a CNN host that will tip you off to letting you know that the authorities are investigating you. There's nothing like the world leader in news, because that is CNN. At least it is right now anyway. Dr. Metzler, you and I used to do a lot of CNN, and wonderful people that we used to work with, but it's a completely different CNN. And on the heels of the Cuomo situation, now we're finding out that yet another CNN host is tipping people off to investigations. So while you were at CNN, were you ever tipped off to any investigation that anybody had? Like, for example, the fact that you ran up a bar tab and didn't pay it over the last couple of weeks because you were on a hot date, or something else along those lines?
I did not run up on any such tip. However, I kindly remind people about the bathroom incident with Don Lemon. While I was at CNN and while we were at the W Hotel on Lakeshore Drive, in which allegedly he went into the bathroom stall and stood over a man at the urinal. At that point,
Are we getting tea right now?
at that point, the man said, can you get away from me? And then he said, do you know who I am? And the man said, I don't give a bleep, bleep, bleep who you are. I'm about to knock you out. And at that point, he came back to the table and said that was a hater. He has now thrown Jussie under the bus by saying that Jussie is in fact a liar. Well done. Interesting. You also have a lawsuit going on in which you touched yourself and then took those same fingers and pushed it up someone's nose. Legendary.
Yes, I was just trying to be a little silly with my opening of the show, and Dr. Metzler just spilled tea, dropped mic, and all
like Lipton's all over the place.
So I think it would only be appropriate if I start the show over again. So hold on. Welcome to another episode of Red and Black, where conservatism is not just the color that you used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, and I want to say something witty and break the ice and do something funny before we spill tea and talk about politics. Isn't that right, Jeff Charles?
Yeah, great. Sure. Yeah. Don Lemon. Yeah, totally up and up. No dirt right there. Yeah.
Zero.
And poor little Jussie. I feel very bad for him.
That's
that time, Jeff.
What?
Why is it when men give you indecent proposals, it's always really gross?
Wait a minute.
Because we're gross. That's why.
Like, that's just gross. Like, what he did allegedly did was just gross. Now, I was in New York City the other night, and I have not been in NYC since COVID, and literally, I was off the train for no more than a minute, and I was kindly offered services, which is putting it very diplomatically. By a lovely gentleman when I got off the train.
I believe it was, can I taste some of that? Something along those lines.
Can I lick that?
Yeah.
And that is less explicit than what he actually said.
Wait, no. I have a question. Important question. Was his last name Cuomo?
I don't think so. But he followed me for about 10 or 15 feet, yelling, hey, can I lick that?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Red and Black, where conservatism is not just the color that you used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, And I'm regretting the first 2 times I opened this show. So I'm going to try it one more time and see if we can actually get into the Cuomo stuff without prepositions and innuendos and bathroom situations. Please, somebody don't bring up senators from Midwestern states tapping underneath stalls, because we can just go and do this for a while. Therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, and I am going to talk about Chris Cuomo, and then we are going to talk about Don Lemon, because it looks as though 2/3 of their primetime programming might be blown up pretty darn fast.
No pun intended.
See this? And I was just about to go to you. You're the oldest on here with the most experience. You're supposed to know better. Away you go. So I'm going to go to the youngins, because at least they won't do that with a double entendre. That's my job, by the way, even though I wouldn't touch that double entendre. And don't even make that a double entendre, Jeff. What the heck is going on over at CNN?
Yeah, I want the record to show first that I'm the only one other than yourself, Laney, that wasn't nasty when we first started the show. So I'm just going to let the record show that. So anyway.
And you let it show that it wasn't me too, right? It's two of us.
No, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Other than you, it's just me and Dr. Metzler, right?
Yeah, it's their minds were on the sewer, but that's okay. That's all right. Sometimes you got to go there. CNN, like, I don't know how this is going to affect the rest of their 10, 15 viewers that they have left. But I mean, I think that CNN just keeps finding ways to discredit itself. I mean, this is just a long line of malfeasance that CNN allowed at their networks. I mean, they allowed Chris Cuomo to interview his brother, and they're yucking it up and acting like they're just together for the holidays and all that. I mean, beyond that, we already know the story, right? Cuomo helped to protect his brother. And I understand wanting to protect your brother, but when you use your position as a journalist and you were going to target people who are making accusations, and it looks like it came out that he was even going to target Janice Dean, who has been very instrumental in this whole sordid affair. So to me, the fact that he was even there in the first place, he should have been let go a long time ago. Like, it should never have even gotten to this point. And it's even looking more and more like they were never actually going to fire him until it became apparent that there were allegations of sexual harassment. And I don't know how those have come into fruition yet, but CNN has just shown itself over and over again to be corrupt, even beyond the stuff with Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon. It used to be more straight news. It used to be more respected. But then they went full activist mode. They abandoned journalistic ethics, and they just went full into activist mode. And they serve as, just like the rest of the mainstream media, they serve as the ministry of propaganda for the Democrats. So there's just so much coming here, and there are indications that they're talking about maybe going back to that. But I don't know. First off, I don't know if that's real. I mean, they could be lying, but I don't know if they can put the toothpaste back in the tube at this point.
Dr. Metzler, I'm going to go to you on that, because I was going to go to Melanie first, but then Jeff brings up putting the toothpaste back in the tube. And I need you to be the straight man for just a second, because there was a time when you and I would do CNN anywhere from 2 to 5 times a week. And part of the reason why they booked us on CNN as much as they did, and for me, it was 2008 to 2015, even though the prime of mine was 2008 through 2014. And they did yours further back and further out. But it was because they needed, we need a substantive conservative voice that can also touch other communities that brought substantive analysis from a political and cultural standpoint. That seems to have gone away a long time ago. And I know that you watch that network from time to time, not that you watch the network, but you got to do what I do sometimes, which is I don't even recognize these people, because although I recognize the set and I recognize these shows, I don't recognize the programming, because that doesn't even look anything like what I used to participate in a lot, which seems like 100 years ago.
Yeah, well, so here's the fundamental problem with CNN. In order to gain any credibility, they essentially would have to start from ground zero. I go back to the fact that my first experience with CNN as a college student was an intern with Bobby Batista. That's how far back that goes. And at that point, there was, in fact, a significant amount of news. They would essentially have to get rid of their talent large scale in order to make anything work and go back to being a journalism outlet. It is going to be a difficult turn, but that's the only way that they can do it. At this point, they have Michael, whatever his name is, filling in, filling in for what was Chris Cuomo's seat. That's not going to last long. Here's a conspiracy theory. I believe that, in fact, what they're going to do is ask Brian Williams, who just left MSNBC, to go back and take that spot. But again, it's a conspiracy theory.
And it's not the worst conspiracy theory in the world. Brian Williams leaves after 28 years. And Melanie, do you remember why Brian Williams was banished to the 11 o'clock hour on MSNBC?
Because he's a lying liar from Liartown.
Colloquially speaking, yes, that's exactly what happened. So you have this, and Dr. Metzler brings it up, but I think it's a very elegant point. And I want to bring it to you, Melanie. The whole aspect of not that long ago. People think that the media has been like this forever, but honest to goodness, CNN had a reputation for being the network that would be on the ground for every single major battle that the United States was in, whether it was in the 1990s in the Baltic states, whether it was Desert Shield, Desert Storm, anything else. CNN was there and could be trusted. That was only about 15, 20 years ago. Now it seems as though everybody has lost their mind, from the Brian Williamses of the world, which, by the way, Brian Williams was NBC Nightly News. All you kids out there that only remember him from the 11th hour, he was the dude making a whole lot of money reading a teleprompter at 6:30 at night not that long ago. All that stuff seems to have gone away, and I don't know if it's coming back. Dr. Metzler's right. Maybe you have to blow up the model, but how many people want to take the risk to say we're going to lose profits, but we're going to get back to journalistic integrity?
But do you think that they're really going to lose profits if they go back to straight news? I would argue that the public at large is actually craving some real news, some objective journalism. Because right now, even with my favorite, station, Fox News, which one of the reasons why I watch Fox is because I know that they are biased in my direction. But I don't pretend like I don't have any awareness that that's the case. So, I think that the public at large is clamoring for some real news. And I would argue that maybe their ratings will go up fabulously if they were actually to provide what they're supposed to be providing and go back to their old model.
Well, it's interesting because most people would say that's not necessarily what they would want to do. And in fact, the argument could be made, and Jeff, I'll swing back to you and then go back around real quick. The argument can be made that CNN changed their model, because when Dr. Metzler and I were going on there were times we were on there together and other times we were on, separately, that CNN looked at the bottom line and said, we're losing money because MSNBC is to the left, Fox News is to the right. People forget that Glenn Beck started at CNN, then went over to Fox News. Campbell Brown was where Anderson Cooper is now.
Yeah.
So you had these things that shifted in the 2000s, and CNN said, our space is shrinking. We got to do something different. Jeff, do you really see that they would want to do that? I don't know if there's a place to make money. And if they're looking at making money, I don't see CNN going back away from what they've doubled and tripled down on.
Yeah, see, but from what I'm saying, they're not really making money. Like, their ratings went down, especially under Trump. It tanked. Their ratings are horrible, like probably some of the worst that they've ever had. So I think that's why there is talk of them possibly going back to more of the straight news model, or at least maybe not being as crazy anti-Trump as they've been. I think the reason why they lost their ratings is because they were known as a credible straight news outlet, at least for the most part. I mean, there was some bias there, but not as much. And then they just went whole hog into Orange Man bad. So I could see why they'd want to move back. Now, I don't know if they will, because I do think that a lot of the leadership in CNN are true believers, and they may be more interested in pushing the agenda than profit, or maybe equal, or maybe even-handed. But I don't know. I think that the only way for them to go back to get what they were getting before is to go back to the way they were before. But I still think that there's a chance that it might be too late. I think Dr. Metzler is right. If they are going to get back to their former glory, the only chance is if they just revamp everything and do something different. And even then, I think it might even still be too late.
Yeah.
Dr. Metzler.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's right. But it's going to, for them to do this, and I think as Jeff said, they're losing money anyway. So from my perspective, the question is it worth the risk? If they're going to do this, though, they can't half do it. They essentially will have to completely revamp the network. The question is, do they have the tolerance for that? Do they have the bandwidth? Do they have the strength? And that is what they're going to have to discover. They are not trusted. People don't believe anything they say. And as a result of that, it is a radical departure from the cult of the left. And here's the thing. They tried to out MSNBC, they tried to outplay them. That backfired. MSNBC is as left and as crazy as you can be. They could not compete with that and still can't.
And MSNBC was honest about where they stand too.
They were very clear. But CNN pretended to be the most trusted name in news. No, you are actually the most lying name. And it's not even news, it's opinion and entertainment. And nobody gives a damn what your opinion is. That's the difficulty for them.
And Melanie, isn't it? I mean, part of what people forget about like MSNBC is people forget that it wasn't like ramen noodles. You just take some hot water and stir it, and all of a sudden they became this liberal life force on the left in the media. For all of the Rachel Maddows that everybody sees, people forget that Keith Olbermann was on that network, being a lefty and struggling for a while before it caught wind and went from there. People forget that Current TV used to exist. It's another network that you and I used to be on, Dr. Metzler. We are aging ourselves. So every time I throw little hints out there, the different networks we used to do. That was nothing but a liberal bastion that no longer exists and hasn't existed for almost 10 years now. People toiled on those networks and they lost money. They were getting crushed by Fox News for a while before they caught wind. But Melody, to their credit, they always knew what they were. They just figured we'll be here and you'll eventually come around. CNN basically tried to do the ramen noodles formula, which is we got to do something here. Let's just throw some stuff in a pot and heat it up and hope that it tastes good. And then they're wondering why nobody wants to come to the restaurant anymore.
But I think the fundamental mistake that CNN makes is that they try to play themselves off as if they're straight news.
Which they're
and they're clearly not. So they try to play the American public and say, oh, yeah, we're straight news, when they're clearly biased. And I think the business model that Fox has and why Fox is so successful is because they tell you straight up, no, we are a conservative news network, and they draw some very clear lines. This is what is news. This is what is opinion. They tell you straight up that that's what this is. So if you're not interested in this, then you should probably turn the channel. They're really upfront about that. But CNN tries to be really insidious with what they do. And they're like, no, we're straight news. We're not biased at all. We're completely objective, when they're clearly not. And I think the American people don't like that. People don't like to be played. They don't like to be messed with. And CNN, messes with people.
Jeff, do you think they're just stuck? I mean, insidious is a strong word, and some of it I can see why she uses it. So I'm not going after Melody's choice of words or opinion, but I'm offering maybe another pathway of how they got here, which is they were stuck. Their brand since the 1980s, since they were founded, was straight news, 24/7, objective, and then they did a complete pivot on their business model with this branding that existed for 25 to 30 years, and they tried to have their cake and eat it too, and it just didn't work. Is that maybe more along the lines of what transpired? Because look, you can't have Chris Cuomo, Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper. When you start naming shows after personalities, you're paying the personalities to be personalities. Whereas before, CNN was CNN Newsroom, CNN this, CNN that. Once you start naming shows after the personalities, you stop being about news. But when you're continuously pushing the branding, Jeff, you're kind of stuck with your legacy and where you're trying to go. And if they don't match, it's a mess.
They sacrifice their principles for personalities.
Right.
I have no grace for them. I'll go further than Melanie did. I call the CNN and the rest of the activist media are the enemy of the people. When they sit there and lie to you day in and day out, they are not your friends. Not making mistakes. Mistakes is one thing. But they promoted the Fine People hoax when it was clearly a lie. They promoted the whole hoax about the Covington kids when that was a lie. Kyle Rittenhouse. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You know, the Koi Pond gate with Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. They promoted all these lies. They are doing propaganda. This isn't like they're trying to actually report straight and then they make mistakes every now and then.
Right.
This is insidious. It's beyond insidious. So to me, I don't have any grace for them. I don't think that their intentions were good. Maybe some of them. I'm sure that there's some great people at CNN. But the leadership under Jeff Zucker, maybe there's a reason why he's out, but under Jeff Zucker, they went whole hog activists and they lied about it because they still tried to pass themselves off as a straight news outlet. I would have at least a modicum of respect if they said, you know what, we've been doing straight news, but we feel like we need to go more to the left, or this is more of our political affiliation. Okay, fine. Like, I mean, they're still going to lie about it, but at least I know that they're not lying about where they're coming from. So there is no sympathy here, and they dug this hole for themselves, and it's up to them to get out of it. And I still think it might be too late.
Let me throw for another theory out there. This kind of allows us to tie from Cuomo to the next hot seat over at CNN, which is this. Maybe this is an issue of rogue personalities. When you allow people to get a little too big for their britches, they kind of act out of pocket, Dr. Metzer. And case in point, I mean, look, there were, and I'm not trying to spill tea because that's not what I do here. I'm the straight guy here. And we're talking about Don Lemon, and there's no pun intended with that either. America, don't look for it. Anywho, with that said, when it came to folks like Don Lemon, there were already complaints from people that were in the industry that he was one guy when he came from Chicago, a different guy when he was on the weekends for CNN, and then in order to try to chase power and fame, he became this third guy. But when you become that third type of person, Dr. Metzer, that's somebody usually you can't control. That usually goes outside of parameters and puts themselves above the brand. So when you start thinking about a guy like Chris Cuomo, he put his family above the CNN brand, regardless of how much money and how much of a platform he got. In fact, he got his XM radio show because he was on CNN. You talk about somebody like a Don Lemon. He's putting himself, he's texting friends, tipping them off to police and official investigations and the like. He's putting himself above the brand. Is some of or a lot of what CNN has gone through personalities going rogue over what a business brand might be looking at? You were somebody that's been a brand manager before.
Yeah, but here's the difficulty. The difficulty is they promoted and rewarded rogue behavior. And so whether those people are rogue or not, if they slapped you down the first time you were rogue, there would be no need for that. They instead promoted the rogue behavior. Now, they got rid of Kathy Griffin doing that whole, cut off Trump's head thing, yet they still employ Jeffrey Toobin, who pleasured himself on a Zoom call. So I'm sorry, both of them should have been gotten rid of. See, here's the problem. The problem is you are promoting and in fact rewarding rogue behavior. So if you're going to do that, I'm going to be as rogue as I can because I get rewarded for that. That's the problem that they have. So I don't buy the whole they went rogue stuff. The first time you go rogue, you slap it down, you shut it down. Instead, they give you more money. They give you a show. They change the name. Instead of the Don Lemon show, live with Don Lemon. Really? I don't want to know about that.
And so it's interesting that you would bring up Jeffrey Tubin, because that seems like that was 10 years ago. In COVID era, in COVID time, that's 10 years ago. That's like light years ago. That just happened not that long ago. And he's right back on the air. And that, Melanie, that it brings that up. I mean, number one, that's a bad look. I mean, I understand you're talking about a president of the United States, so that's above the bar versus just, the nastiness on the Zoom call. But Kathy Griffin was known. Her brand is to be just ridiculous. I mean, she would lick Anderson Cooper's face on Rockin' New Year's Eve or whatever. You knew she was just doing that kind of stuff.
She was just nasty.
She always did that. Jeffrey Tubin was your legal analyst. And yet he's back on the set. They said, okay, we'll make it good because we'll have Ana Cabrera say, well, you had a very, no, I think it was Breonna Keeler. You had a very unfortunate incident that we would like to discuss your absence very quickly. Like that was going to be the palate cleanser. So
Breonna Keeler is the reason why CNN deserves to go down. I just had to.
Oh yeah, and it's ridiculous. I'm like, Breonna, really? Just stop talking.
But again, here's the crazy thing, Melanie, right? Not that long ago, Breonna Keeler was not viewed as that. There was a time where Breonna Keeler was seen as a steady, objective, talented Washington reporter until she got a show mid-morning, and then you can see that it's less about pushing hard facts and getting strong answers. It seemed to have an agenda attached to it. And then you have John Berman and others where you're less doing fact finding versus narrative finding. And once you do that, and you have James Earl Jones still saying, this is CNN, it doesn't resonate with America.
It doesn't. And I have so many questions about the Jeff Tubin thing. Like anybody who's been on a Zoom call can tell the difference of whether you're on camera or not. Like how I've been in like many of us have been in zillions of meetings during this pandemic, and like when in the middle of a work day does a spirit just move you? I don't understand.
I don't think that was a spirit moving.
So
yeah, there was something moving, but it wasn't
there.
I'm just saying, I don't understand.
Hold on. I let y'all derail 3 beginnings to this show. I can't let you derail the middle of the show too.
I'm just saying, how do you get out of that at a job? Like he must have dirt on somebody, because I don't know how you do something like that. Like that's you sexually harassed everybody on that Zoom call, and because that's like mass sexual harassment, right? So. Like, how does that happen? How do you keep your job?
It happens because it's America. We have seen men do this throughout the history of America. It's not that bad. He wasn't really directing it at you. He apologized. What more do you want him to do?
I thought we were on a break. Like when I go on a break at a meeting,
no normal person can get away with that.
No. And so while you're on a break, you're pleasuring yourself?
That's what I'm saying. Dude. Like when I go on a break, I don't go grab my little.
Only at CNN would that happen, and then they still bring him back. Right. No other company would do that.
No. But that kind of gets to the point that I want to get to before we pivot on, which is the culture there is broken when you keep seeing this, because there's nothing worse, because the stuff about Dawn and stuff you hear when you're in the industry about this happening or that happening, or a lawsuit, and you get some of the facts, but then there's other stuff going on. We could talk about that in the New York Post. We could talk about it here or wherever. But when you see that one high-profile star leave CNN because they were too far involved with an investigation, and they didn't blur the lines between journalism and ethics and investigations, the line was just completely removed. It's bad enough when you have that and it's a high-profile star. It's a completely different story when right on the heels of that, there's another high-profile case for the same exact things happening. And then just for the worst of optics, you literally have your 9 o'clock hour host that always talks to your 10 o'clock hour host and a warm handoff of shows 5 days a week. It just looks like a culture that's run amok. And again, I mean, Dr. Metzler, the more I think about it, the more I think you're right. Maybe it's just going to take a blow up of CNN to say, look, we're going back to our roots. Bernard Shaw has to be somewhere around here. We'll put him in the basement where there's some kind of shelling going on. And we're going to take a hit on ratings for a while, but this is what we're going to do.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. And look, so let me just, again with my conspiracy theories. So, Letitia James drops out of the governor's race in New York City, in New York State. People are saying she dropped out because she just wants to continue going after Trump. That's a very superficial analysis. In order to win governor in the state of New York, you need the donors. Here's my question. How many of those donors are controlled by Chris Cuomo? How many of those? Because in fact, Chris blames her not only for his exit, but for his brother's exit. So how much of that is actually what's going on behind the scenes relative to Letitia James? And then the Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, decides, okay, in order to win, I need to have a Black attorney, lieutenant governor. She gets the Black lieutenant governor. The Black lieutenant governor is asked on his background check, have you ever been the subject of an investigation relative to campaign finance violations? He says no. The fact is, not once, not twice, but 3 times, he was, in fact, a subject. So here's the question for her. Do you fire the Black lieutenant governor and alienate the base, or do you let him get out of office on his own? He like, I ain't going nowhere. So it's these kinds of things that we're talking about relative to the whole Cuomo machine. Do understand, Cuomo was taken out. Yes, Cuomo still controls the politics of that state. Let's not be foolish. Again, just a conspiracy theory.
People don't, but I'm going to say this and I'm going to pivot on to something else that has some teeth to it. I mean, this has teeth to it, but something else that has teeth to it that's riding underneath the radar that people aren't even talking about that should scare people around the world. But before we get to that, people forget, they think of Andrew Cuomo as like, well, the Cuomo machine was created by Andrew Cuomo, so it'll be dismantled.
No.
Americans, their attention spans are so small. Do you remember the other Governor Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, from the freaking 80s? So when you start talking about political machines, a 10-year machine is all nice and good. You're not dealing with a 10-year machine. You're dealing with a 40-year machine. And as a result of that, it's a different type of ball game, which again, unfortunately, Jeff, and I'll go to you to give you the last word. When you start talking about all that transpired at CNN, people forget that before Chris Cuomo was at CNN, Chris Cuomo was at ABC News.
Yes.
So now you're talking about somebody that can influence 2 newsrooms while the brother is a sitting governor riding the coattails of the late former New York governor, who at one point in time was considered a presidential candidate. And when you tie all that together with the controversies over COVID in New York City and the nursing homes, and then the sexual harassment suits, and then the involvement of Chris Cuomo, that's why CNN was negligent in their duties to allow it to spiral as long as it did. Number 2, to allow Chris Cuomo to use the airwaves as much as he did with his brother. And number 3, pull the plug as late in the game as they did.
Yeah, but here's the thing about this, though, Lenny, and I wrote an article about this.
Of course, you wrote an article about it, Jeff. You write
I wrote an article about everything. Yeah. Here's the thing, though. The way I look at this, like, I'm not really shocked by any of this, honestly.
No.
I'm not shocked that Cuomo did what he did. I'm not shocked that CNN refused to fire. I'm not shocked by anything, because this situation is just a microcosm of what the activist media already does writ large. I mean, there is a very deep and abiding relationship between the activist media and the Democratic Party. That's just the way it is. 9 times out of 10, they are going to defend the Democrat. They are going to attack the Republican, and they're not going to hold any Democrats accountable unless it gets to the point where they become more of a liability, like Andrew Cuomo did, because he had the nursing home stuff and the sexual assault. So at that point, they needed to jettison him. I don't believe for a second that they actually wanted to do that.
That had no.
So. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the thing is, this is just what the media does. This is the world that we live in now. We have, since Democrats are in office, we have an activist media that is here to help and protect the government as much as possible. I mean, it just came out a couple days ago. Surprisingly, it was CNN that reported this, that the Biden administration was having secret briefings with members of the press to skew the coverage on inflation and the supply chain crisis and all the economic issues. And now, magically, we have a little bit better coverage of the Biden administration's handling of that. This is a very incestuous relationship that they have here. It's a huge problem, and really, they're not going to stop because they don't have to. They don't have. I mean, they obviously don't care about losing money. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope they backtrack, but I don't think that they will. The only way to combat this is with a media apparatus that is able to push back on a lot of what they're doing, which is why I'm glad to see conservative media coming up even more, and they're finding even more ways to be more present online and to avoid the censorship efforts that the left is engaged in.
And I will say this. I didn't digress. What the hell are y'all drinking? Even though I will digress now. I digress. Number one, I will say, Jeff, to the Biden administration's defense and to the media's defense in 2021, presidential administrations have been playing these type of games with the media for a long time. FDR was doing this back in the day. Kennedy was good at this. Reagan was a master at this. Clinton was pretty damn good. Obama was pretty damn good. So it's not as though the Biden administration, or Democrats in general are the first, administrations to sit there and manipulate the media and give them access when they want to give them access and then shut them down when they want to shut them down. I'll give you a quick, remember the Obama example. There's a period of time Obama started cutting off access, and everybody's like, wait a minute, you said you were going to be the most transparent administration ever. What happened to that? It's kind of like the shovel-ready jobs. They weren't quite as shovel-ready as he thought they were. One of those, so we've seen that on both sides. This is not new, but unfortunately it's still entrenched. But the flip side of what you brought up, Jeff, and I'm going to go to you about this, Melanie, at first, is you talk about what the media gets access to and what they get to fixate on. Melanie, there are times where the media will report a story and never bring it up again. And it's oftentimes it ends up being stories that are important, like the story that came out of Uganda earlier this week. The story where the Chinese basically repoed the Ugandan international airport. Literally, like Repo Man came up in the middle of the night and was like, you ain't paying your car note, and put a padlock basically on the international airport and like, this is mine now. Now, for those of you that haven't been following the story, here's the catch. And Melanie, I want you to talk about why this is important for Americans. The catch is the Ugandans entered an agreement to take loans from the Chinese, and they weren't able to pay them back and meet the conditions. And so the Chinese said, no, I know you want some additional conditions. You said you don't want to meet them. No, we're good. We'll just take the one international airport you have in your country. Thank you very much. Now, for all of you that are not paying attention to the national debt or anything else along those lines, because, all these wonderful, silly things we've been talking about with Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon for the first half of the show, can you please talk a little bit as to why national debt and owing money to countries such as China can have disastrous results even in 2021?
That's exactly right, because we owe huge debts to China all over the United States. And when you couple that with the fact that China's military outnumbers ours. And I don't think a lot of people realize that at all. So when you combine the fact that China owns a lot of American land and American property and a lot of the United States, coupled with we are outnumbered as far as their military is concerned. And if you want to marry that idea with the fact that their whole 2025 goal, and 2025 is right around the corner, is to be the world superpower over the United States. When you take those three facts and put them all together, it spells danger for the United States. Big time danger for the United States. It's a big deal. It's a big problem. And instead of having a president who cuddles up and coddles China, we should have a president who is treating China like our adversary, because they are. China is not our friend.
Absolutely. And see, here's the thing. People keep talking about China, and China's not going to get into a physical war with us. They don't need to. All they need to say is, bitch, better have my money. And at that point, they will shut down our global markets. They will shut down a currency, and they're going to be like, bitch, where my money at? And that is exactly, and they're trying to do the same thing in the Caribbean. In Grenada, they are saying to Grenada, we'll give you additional funds, but what that means is you have to give us all of your fishing and water rights. People of Grenada say, hey, what? You think me stupid? Because if I give you that, you take all my fish, which is what I live on, and I'm not going to be. China is going across the globe, not just Africa, across the globe. The Caribbean is particularly vulnerable to this. And when we have the conversation about China, people are talking about it in the abstract. That is fatal for America and for our economy. China owns us. And the more we keep borrowing from them at these exorbitant interest rates, the worse it gets. But folk are like, oh yeah, well, yeah, let's just have a little bit more money for childcare. Okay, I hear what you're saying, but who gonna pay for that? You have to pay it back. China is not benevolent. And I think folks need to wake up to that. They're acting as if what China is doing is in the abstract. China will ruin our economy without firing a single shot. You
And,
have to
and,
wake up.
and Jeff, and here's the point with this. Number one, you know, people forget all the accusations, and I'm not trying to go through presidential candidacy history, but part of what transpired that people said he was crazy for saying, and then they were like, oh, maybe he's right, was Mitt Romney in 2012 talking about China manipulating the currency and being able to manipulate thus the yield out of their annual economy. The results were, why are you getting 7-8% of your you know what I'm talking about, the annual year of their gross national product. There you go.
GNP, yeah.
GNP. How the heck are you getting 7, 8, 9%? Well, it's because they're manipulating the currency. Well, if they're doing that and they're lending you money, you're having a problem. You're having a situation. Now, Dr. Metzler brings up something very interesting, and I'm going to bring it to you, Jeff, because there's two folds to this. Number one, what we were sold was what everybody borrows money off of everybody. I mean, you know, Japan, we heard these conversations about Japan 30 years ago too, but Japan never tried to do anything to us. Well, Japan also has a democracy too. They're not some blend of a free market communist society that's cozied up with the Russians. Let's start with that, number one. And number two, you know, people keep saying that, well, you know, this stuff is all in theory. No one's going to ever call anybody's bluff on owing them money. If they get behind, they'll just print more money until somebody claims somebody's only international airport in an African country to set an example. Jeff, to Dr. Metzler's point, This is an actualized example of what people have been fearful of for years, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And I think, Lenny, the problem is actually even
Yeah.
worse than we think. I mean, when I look at this from a media perspective, what a lot of people don't know is the relationship that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has with our media.
Yes.
It was just like a couple of years ago, maybe last year or the year before, that it was revealed. And when I say revealed, it was revealed, but I mean, nobody really covered it, but it was out there that the Chinese government had been paying our media outlets, our mainstream media outlets, I'm talking about Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, a bunch of these outlets to publish pro-China propaganda in their outlets. So propaganda that was written by a Chinese news agency that was working for the Chinese government to print those articles that were pro-China in their papers. Even beyond that, they even have a program where they invite journalists, like people from Slate. They invite them over to China. They show them the sites. They wine and dine them, and they explicitly do so for favorable coverage. That is the deal that they make with these people. So these Slate people came back and started writing all these glowing articles about China. It's not just Slate; it's a lot of them. China is infiltrating the Western world through its media as well, not just America, but in other countries as well. They are doing so to influence the Western world to be more favorable towards them. It even goes beyond that. I mean, there was another report that came out that showed that card-carrying members, and I mean this, card-carrying members of the Chinese Communist Party were infiltrating mega corporations in the Western world, in the United States, in the UK, Germany, France. Thousands and thousands, I can't remember the exact number, but it was like tens of thousands of these people in high-level positions influencing these corporations. So we don't, again, this stuff flies under the radar because, and nobody actually talks about it. I mean, pretty much, it's like you even brought that up, like this Uganda thing flew under the radar. Everything that China does manages to fly under the radar because our media and our government don't want people knowing about it. So it makes you wonder who is complicit in all of this, because it's not just China doing their thing. We've got people in the Western world who are complying and being complicit in helping the communist regime. That's one of the reasons why they've been able to amass such power and influence, and it's a scary thought.
Well, and so there's been a lot of focus on Putin and the potential invasion of Ukraine. Okay, all that's cute. But at the end of the day, they've buried the Uganda story. The Uganda story is much more important. Putin is going to do what Putin's going to do. However, he is not going to be trying to get in no military. He is trying to find relevance. And you can cover that story. That's fine. The most important and relevant story to America is China and Uganda, because what they are doing to Uganda is what they're going to do to the United States. But folk are like, Uganda, where's that? And that's, I think, folks don't understand what the economic impact of that is going to be. And I think that's the issue.
And moving forward, Melanie, I mean, to Dr. Metzler's point, I want to build upon that, which is people don't understand how much China's investing in Africa, where, by the way, that country over there, and I put that in air quotes, everybody, I know that Africa is not a country. Africa is two countries, Africa and South Africa. There. Shady Side Academy, Central Catholic High School, and Davidson College did not appreciate that comment from me. Anywho, with that said, Melody, people forget that the African continent has a lot of rich natural resources.
Precisely.
To this day.
Precisely.
Everything from oil to the minerals you need to make sure all those wonderful technological things that you kids like doing on TikTok and using for TikTok actually work. So when you start repoing people's freaking international airports, there's a problem with that. The issue is, and Dr. Metzler brought this up, Melody, Vladimir Putin is not going to recall your loan.
No.
But Xi Jinping is already showing that he's inclined to recall your loan. He ain't playing. And neither are the Chinese, specifically because if you start thinking about what transpired with Uganda, what's been going on with the cyber spying on American companies for years now, and we're still living in a pandemic where we're still not allowed to learn the true instances that transpired in Wuhan 2 years ago. This is dangerous from a geopolitical and economic standpoint.
And you know what else we haven't even brought up are the Confucius Institutes in our colleges and universities. We haven't even touched upon their infiltration there.
Yes.
In all of our higher education institutions, where they're conducting research and stealing our intellectual property from universities and colleges. We haven't even talked about that either.
Yeah.
The students that go there are literally just spies.
That's a whole other thing too. And Florida's
other...
been trying to put the measures in place to stop that, but we need more states to do that.
Yeah, and that's the entire thing. So with the Chinese and other countries too, but particularly with the Chinese, the American universities will take their money because they're paying so much above tuition rates.
Right.
While they do that and they're conducting research, the research is to steal our intellectual property.
Exactly.
And folk are like, oh, we should welcome foreign students. We welcoming thieves. We're welcoming spies. We're giving them American degrees. In fact, we are teaching them how to beat us. And people say, well, that's very xenophobic. No, they ain't got nothing to do with that. That has to do with the fact that the American universities are so greedy, they will increase the tuition. It's cash. They ain't got to worry about financial aid because they ain't getting none. They're getting much more than that because they're doing this research in these labs. Meanwhile, they are stealing the intellectual property that we are developing, taking it back to China and kicking our asses. And folk are like, the university professors are like, well, that's ludicrous. No, it's not. You stupid.
Correct. All correct.
So
that's exactly right.
Before we get out of here, because you all have depressed me with all this stuff between CNN and Uganda and China. I don't know what's real and what's fake anymore, which kind of leads me to this. So breaking the ice before we go, apparently, or just kind of bringing the temperature down a little bit, I guess I should say. There's a story that came out this week. There was some type of pro wrestling incident where you know that pro wrestling, how real it is, right? Because everything on pro wrestling is real. Well, while they were doing their real pro wrestling, somebody apparently came out of the crowd and wanted to be part of the show and started attacking the pro wrestler while the pro wrestler is doing their pro wrestling thing. Jeff, you can comment about the wrestling if you want, but has anybody ever tried to kind of like do a writing or punditry thing while you were doing your punditry thing, like a live hit or something along those lines? And if so, tell a story. And Dr. Metzler, I know you have one, just don't make it too long.
No, I mean, and I didn't really see the story, but I mean, if they would have tried it, it would have gone bad for them, but probably not as bad as it went for the guy who actually tried to attack a WWE wrestler. This doesn't sound like a good idea.
They're still big. They're still strong. They're still athletic.
They're athletic, and when they're beating each other up, they actually are beating each other up, even though the whole thing is choreographed. They're still messing each other up. So, probably maybe don't do that. Just a suggestion.
You heard that directly from Jeff Charles. That was a true fresh perspective there, like how I did with Charles. There you go, Mr. Charles. From Mr. Charles to Dr. Metzler. Give me a real quick 30-second. I was on set doing a show and blank.
Okay, so I was on set one time with Larry Kudlow, and the person who was doing my IFB, she was doing all of those kinds of things. So she's putting it, putting the IFB in and all those kinds of things. She's like, well, so I need to make sure that it's not showing. So may I open your but nah, baby, you step back. Cause see, all that it ain't gonna work. Cause see, here's the thing. When you do something like that, and my wife sees that, I'm gonna be living under a bridge. I can't.
And you gonna die.
I'm gonna die. Because
No,
she's gonna die, and I'm also
you'll be
I'm also going to die. So all that, no, she don't. It don't work like that.
Before you brag on your radio show, because we only got like 2 minutes, you got 30-second story about. I remember one time I was doing a live hit and blank.
I was doing a live hit with the one and only Roland Martin, and I know you guys really love him, but we got into a bit of a verbal altercation, and he called me baby while we were in our altercation. Fortunately, I had the one and only Reverend Ralph J. Chittum's on the set.
Oh, Lord.
And he very promptly put him in his place.
Yeah,
Ralph, the Rev don't.
The Rev don't play that.
I can imagine where that went.
No, that did not end well.
That's not the kind of story I was talking. See what? I mean, you know,
it was close enough.
This is what I feel like after an hour of this I need to do. Ready? Hello, here's another edition of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you used to. I'm Lenny McAllister. Over the course of this last hour, these folks have been saying things that I absolutely positively did not expect them to say. And I don't know if I need to say I'm sorry. I don't know if I need to duck underneath the table or if I need a glass of wine. I don't know. But either way, yeah, go ahead, Dr. Metzler. I know you have something witty to say.
Well, I do. In fact, I want you to see here, Red and Black.
Nice.
That is. He's so suave. He's the most sophisticated man on the show.
I want you to see that because
that's what you do. Jeff, what's going on this week? Go ahead, Dr. Metzler, real quick.
No, I'm just welcoming you all to my New York City home.
He's flossing. Mr. Charles, what you got going on this week?
Yeah, I got a fresh perspective with Jeff Charles. Got my podcast going. I just did an interview with Kara Frederick on big tech censorship. So go ahead and check that out on my YouTube channel. I'll be dropping another for my audio only. So stay tuned.
Dig it. Melanie, what you got going? Radio show Thursday. What time and where? Tell us once again.
On Money Talk with Melanie, 98.7 The Coast, streaming live on 98.7 The Coast website. I just booked, if anyone recalls, one of the major upsets of this past election was one and only Ed Durr, who ousted the Senate president in New Jersey. And I have booked him on the next Money Talk with Melanie on December 16th at 7 o'clock.
Fantastic. What website? Where will it stream? Tell us real quick.
98.7 The Coast. Just look it up and you'll be right there.
All righty. Dr. Metzler, real quick, what you got going on?
Well, so in January, we will be officially premiering the Metzler Minutes. So stay tuned for that. I will have you all as guests on the Metzler Minutes. Is
that a promise or a threat?
It's both.
Okay.
So it's ION.TV.com. So we'll talk some more about that, but I'll have you all on, particularly doing the political roundup. I'll have Melanie on doing money, and I'll have Jeff on, particularly because he's Jeff. I, of course, will have you on, Lenny, because you're the man. So we will be doing all of those things. So very much look forward to that.
Listen, folks, keep tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. Catch up to us next week. Hey, you know what? In the chat room, if you haven't done it already, throw ideas in regards to what you'd like us to talk about, because we do pay attention. We do love you. And every now and then we might go into that chat room, grab something out, and you might surprise you on an upcoming episode. So thank you for following. Thank you for chatting. We look forward to you all following us. Spread the word. We'll talk to you later on. TCNGB. Take care and God bless.
Like and subscribe. Y'all.
Yeah.
Subscribe. Y'all, I see y'all talking up in there. We love that. Subscribe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Peace.
Peace.